things don't have to be expensive to be well designed. They need to be more current. So interiors date every 7 to 10 years. And you were talking about websites date a lot faster than that, don't they?
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, TherapyNotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast. This is episode number 328, and I'm Gordon Brewer, and so glad you're listening to this particular episode. And if this is the first time for you to find the podcast, glad you found us, and hope you'll take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also be sure and go back and listen to all the other 327 episodes, which every time I look at that number, I'm just amazed that we've gotten this far with the podcast since I started it back in 2017. Golly, it's a long time ago. But anyway, hope you've had a good weekend, or you're having a good week whenever you might be listening to this. My guest today for this episode is Carolyn Boldt, and we're going to be talking about our therapeutic spaces. I've had a few other guests. One in particular that comes to mind is Allison Pigeon. We talked about, design and our office space, but Carolyn's specialty is really being a person that has got a background in architectural design. She's, in fact, that's what her degree is interior architectural design from University of Texas in Austin. But anyway, I had a wonderful conversation with Carolyn, and just thinking about how we put together the spaces in which we see our clients, and also thinking about how that affects our business, how that affects our branding, and all those kinds of things. One quick story that comes to mind for me is I'm thinking back when I first got started in private practice. I remember I got a client that came to me, and they had been in therapy before. In fact, they had done therapy with other therapists quite a while. And I asked them what made them decide to change. And they said, well, the other therapist just seemed to be a bit disorganized. Her office was very messy, and I just didn't feel comfortable being in that office. And so that tells me, and we probably know this instinctually, the space that you're in seeing clients is really important. So we'll get to my conversation with Carolyn here in just a moment. One of the things I'd love for you to do is go over to practiceoftherapy.com and check out all the resources I have there. If you've not done so, take time to subscribe to the email list, and you can do that in any number of ways and get lots of freebies. One particular resource that I have is the Private Practice Startup Guide. And also, if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/community, you can sign up for a free Practice of Therapy community, and it's located on the Circle platform. And it's just a way for you to connect with other therapists and have conversations. It's very much like a Facebook group, but it's not in the Facebook algorithm, and I have total control of the space. So that's one advantage to it. But you can find out more about that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/community. And also, if you're ever interested in doing some consulting with me, that is something that I do. And so I invite you to find out more about that by going to the website, practiceoftherapy.com, and you'll see all the links there to find all of those things. So be sure and check it out. And also here, before we get to my conversation with Carolyn, I'd love for you to hear from one of the other members of the PsychCraft Network, along with some things from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hey there. Are you searching for answers and clarity on your mental health journey? Well, I've got the podcast just for you. Welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy, a podcast that's like having a heartfelt conversation with a trusted friend and who understands what you're going through. I'm your host, Steve Biesel, a therapist and proud member of the PsychCraft Network. Finding Your Way Through Therapy is a safe space where we openly explore the emotional complexities of mental health. From busting common myths to sharing actionable advice, we'll navigate this journey together through solo episodes as well as special guests. Discover your inner strength, resilience, and hope as we explore topics like self-care, building healthy relationships, cognitive behavioral therapy, and overcoming challenges. You'll come away with a renewed sense of self and the tools to create a life filled with fulfillment and well-being. So join me on Finding Your Way Through Therapy as we become your companion on this deeply personal journey. I am part of the PsychCraft Network and truly enjoy all the episodes. And back to your regular scheduled programming.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving. Equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm happy for you to get to know today Carolyn Boldt. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thanks for having me, Gordon.
Yes, and Carolyn is located in Atlanta, Georgia. And today we're going to be just talking about how your therapy space and your office is set up. That's really kind of Carolyn's background is interior design and architecture. And she really specializes kind of in our niche of therapy and that sort of thing. So, Carolyn, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
It's been an interesting ride. So I am an interior architectural designer, studied in Texas. And so, yes, I am a Texan. And in 2000-ish, I started working for myself and started working with my husband, who's an architectural engineer and a general contractor. And we did work in the Atlanta area and doing design build. And our largest client was Life University, which is a chiropractic college. And that got us immersed in the business of holistic health and healthcare in general, but more of the alternative and holistic and the not the typical just medical model. And out of that, we had an opportunity in 2010 to teach classes to the chiropractic students on the value that your office space has in elevating your success. And out of that, we organically ended up starting to design chiropractic offices all over the country. And then that merged into other alternative healthcare and other. So any brick and mortar practice management practice group that we can work with, that we're able to work with all over the country. So our goal is to elevate a person's business. So we look at interior design and interior architecture as it's a business expense, just like building your website.
Mm-hmm.
It's that type of a marketing thing. You need to show up physically the way you want people to see you. So we can talk about that all day.
Yes. Well, it's interesting to me, as you were describing that, that the chiropractic folks are getting some marketing stuff in their training, whereas for most of us as therapists, we get very little, if to little to no training in marketing and how to run the business side of our practice and all of that sort of thing, which is why I started this podcast to begin with, is to kind of teach people that. But you do bring up a good point, Carolyn, because I think it's important for people to think about the space that they're in as a marketing tool.
Yes, it very much is. So, when we talk about design to obviously to really large corporations, interior architecture, interior design is just, it's part of what they know to do. It's part of what they do as a business. They understand how it enhances their operations, enhances their business, et cetera. But the smaller practitioner doesn't. They look at it as more of a luxury. And in reality, commercial interior design is not a luxury. Commercial interior design is good business choices and good business sense. It's very different than residential design, which would be much more of a luxury. So my goal in these being a guest on these podcasts is getting that message out so people are not, turned off by, hey, that's just a luxury, when it's not at all. It's definitely, it's just like doing your own website versus hiring someone that knows what they're doing to do your website. It makes a world of difference.
Yes, it does. It does. So as you've done all of this and we're starting to work with people in our fields, what have you learned about where we maybe can improve and what we need to do better as far as thinking about our space? I know one of the things that is concerned for a lot of people is just, maintaining confidentiality, but also comfort and that sort of thing.
Yes. So what you just mentioned is very functional needs that you'd have as an office. And we always have to work first. We adhere to form follows function. So what that means is it has to function first, but the form would be the three-dimensional space. So once we get past the function, so yes, in a therapist office, confidentiality, making sure it's quiet, making sure it sound, obviously, all types of things that have to do with sound. First, the sound not going through the walls, the sound being contained, feeling that sense of safety. You want your patients, that's a really high value, is to make sure your patients feel safe so that they can be heard. Once that function is done and they're comfortable, they can sit somewhere that the springs aren't breaking out of the chair and things of that sort. But once that is done, if you think about it in terms of marketing, though, marketing is creating an environment for interiors. It's creating an environment that actually helps support the image and what you're trying to get across is who you are and how you can serve your patient. And then also looking at designing a space that will enhance your ideal patient's experience. So it's about the experience. It's all about the experience. So we think about retail design and hospitality design when we talk about design, because if you think about retail design, when you walk into a store, the space needs to match what the product that's being sold in there is. If it doesn't, then there's a disconnect and the sales go down. So therapy is also a choice in any kind of medical healthcare profession that is a choice. And at this point, they're all a choice because there's competition with the ones that, the cancer doctor may not be your choice, but there's still a competition in which cancer doctor you go to.
Mm-hmm.
But with that, there's a choice. You just need to, it's how you show up. So you may show up wonderfully, but if your space does not match that, you're
Mm-hmm.
losing.
Right.
So
Right.
so retail design is the first impression. And then hospitality design brings in the culture that you're creating. So when you think about, hey, I'm going to go to dinner tonight, you think about the food and you think about the product you're going to get, but you also think about the atmosphere you want.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
as a practitioner, what kind of atmosphere do you want for your patients? And if you can create that around them, everything gets easier.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago, I had a client come to me that had been working with another therapist. And, of course, I was curious as to why they were changing therapist or whatever. And the picture I got is that the other therapist was just very disorganized and their office was very cluttered. And
Mm.
so that just made them feel just uncomfortable and just felt like, okay, does this therapist really have their act together? That sort of thing. And that's not anything against that therapist. They were probably a very good therapist, but that impression was made on the client, and those first impressions are so important.
Yes, very much important. We have a free resource for your listeners that I'll make sure that you have in the show notes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the 5-point designer checklist. And what
Mm-hmm.
it is, it's the 5 things that we would tell people to look at first
Mm-hmm.
in their office to consider how their image shows up.
Yeah.
And the very first one is it cluttered? Is it
Mm-hmm.
dirty? And is it cluttered?
Yeah.
And it's amazing because we live in the space and we forget. We don't think about it. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we tell people in this booklet is don't you look at it. You need to bring in another party to be your eyes and ears to walk through with this checklist with you. And
Mm-hmm.
ideally that third party it's someone you trust and that they're going to
Mm-hmm.
be absolutely brutally honest with you, but
Right.
also that they represent your ideal patient
Mm-hmm.
because you need to have your space be designed for your ideal patient to attract it, just like you would talk about your website. It's
Mm-hmm.
like what's the benefits of your therapy versus the next guy? Maybe you may not say versus the next guy, but why?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want to show up and how do you want to be? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's one of the very first ones is clutter.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, while you're speaking of that, what are some of the other things on that checklist?
Yeah, the clutter and dirty and just not all therapists have their own offices with bathrooms and things, but dirty bathrooms are a real turnoff. So just be sure that that's not something that
Mm-hmm.
you have, but just that feeling when you first walk in. The second one is it goes beyond just being cluttered and dirty, but is it damaged? Are things broken? Are they torn? Are they ripped? You'd be surprised how many exam tables we see with duct tape on them. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like, why does that make that okay? Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Right.
what that does is that gives the impression of not caring, of not
Mm-hmm.
quality. It just downgrades. You would think about if you would go to a restaurant and you had duct tape on the chair. The next one we talk about is things being dated. So although things don't have to be expensive to be well designed, they need to be more current. So interiors date every 7 to 10 years. And you were talking about websites date a lot faster than that, don't they?
Oh yeah.
But,
Oh yeah.
but interiors, just like clothing, date every 7 to 10 years. And you can be really comfortable for 7 to 10 years and your stuff starts to get dated and you're fine for the patients that have been coming to you if they're coming to you that long because they like you, they come to you, but it's really hard to start attracting new patients because you
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like you're up to date. And you don't feel
Right.
like it's also very hard to sell your practice if that's what it looks like. So
Mm-hmm.
being dated. And then the other thing we look at is just one of the ways you can update is your color palette and your finishes and things of that sort. And
Mm-hmm.
the other way is lighting. So the lighting in your space is a very critical. You can really use it to work for you, or it can be really offensive.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to say more about that, about the lighting?
Sure, sure. So there's psychology of lighting. Well, that has to do with interiors. So the brighter the light, this is some generalities. The brighter the light, the more energy there is in the space. The lower the light level, the less energy. It's naturally understood. You go outside, middle of the day, beautiful bright sunshine, you get energy. It gives you energy. Same way as if you want to go to sleep at night, you want to get all the darkness so that you can go to sleep and get that melatonin going. And that actually is a physical reaction of your body. So you can use that to your advantage. So if you want, say you're working with some patients that have, the traumatic, what do you call PTSD? Yes, I can't.
PTSD. Yeah.
Yes. You want to make sure that space feels very calm for them. So you want to make sure that the light levels are consistent and they're not too bright, they're not too low. You want to make sure that there's not too much clutter and pattern, because that can disrupt their mind, and just keeping things calm and easy and stressful, because you want them to be comfortable so that they can get past where they are. So the same thing with working with children. If you're working with children, you don't want the light level to be so low that they feel like they're going to go to grandma's and go to sleep and take a nap. So you just need to, so sometimes dimmers work if you have a variety of people, that you're working with. But lighting is a real valuable thing, and just paying attention to it. Having an office space with overall wash of light is not really conducive to a real warm conversation.
Right. Right.
So.
And I would guess too, just the coloring of the light makes a difference as well. I just think about, when you go to buy light bulbs, they're either warm or cool,
That's yes,
and
exactly right. Exactly right. So the warm light, which is exactly what it says, that has the lower, what they call it, a Kelvin color on it, if you know what I'm talking about. The warm light. So our original light bulbs were incandescent, as we know, and you can't even really get incandescent anymore. I mean, you can get the Edison bulbs, which are almost orange. If you know what I'm talking about, you see the filament.
Yes.
But that, those were used psychologically. Those were used the low light. You didn't have a lot of, it was dark. It was home, people didn't work after dark like that. They were in their homes, et cetera, years ago. So when light started to change, it started to become the fluorescent, you would go to the other extreme, and you have this wash of almost a blue-green light above you that washed everybody's faces out, and that was not very appealing either. So LED gives you a lot of variability. You can even get LED bulbs that'll change the color lights for you, just like you would a dimmer. So you go to more of the yellow light and things get really calm, and you go to the more of the white light, once again, which is like sunlight is the whitest light, and you get a lot of energy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fascinating. And I think it's things that we maybe don't really think about. How important do you think it is to have colors that match your brand? I would think that would be, I don't know why I thought of that, but I would think that would be important.
Well, I think it's important. So let me say this with a grain of salt. It depends on the color of your brand. So if you have anything to do with building digital or websites or graphics, the color, there's PMS colors, right? There's hex colors, et cetera. But those colors are always going to be much more saturated because they're used in a small little bit of color, or they're used in small little items. So when we have people come to us and let's just say their color is this bright blue on their logo card, et cetera, and they want to paint the wall that color, that's too much. Okay. So depending on the color that you're using, you need to use it sparingly. At the same time I say that, your logo should not just be a logo. Your logo should be a representation of a brand. So your brand in the marketing world is how you're showing up and how your identity is. And so what that identity represents, let's just say it's trying to think of one to use, but say you've chosen a logo that has a lot of movement in it,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe you work with women, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so your logo itself has more femininity to it. That femininity, if you're working with women, needs to be transferred into your office space. The same way, say you're working with, let me say very masculine,
Mm-hmm.
ex-Marines that have
Yes.
PSD or something,
Yeah.
that needs to be translated for them to feel comfortable into your
Yeah.
space. And so that logo would be it's a small little representation of the whole image that you're trying to encapsulate. So
Yeah.
if you're using color in the logo, it's nice to have that transfer, because that color should be representing the same thing that your brand is representing, because there's a
Right.
whole psychology of color. There's
Yeah.
a huge
Yes.
psychology of color.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yeah. I'm reminded of my colleague. Shout out to him. I was just in a meeting with him, Uriah Guilford, and he's out in California, but the name of his practice is In Tune Family Counseling, or Family Therapy. And the whole theme of his office are musical instruments and recording and all of that sort of thing. And
Oh,
so
wow.
it's pretty,
Memory.
yeah,
Yeah, creates a
yeah,
memory.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So of how that all works. So if you think through that's clever. That's very
Mm-hmm.
clever. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
to answer your question, it should have continuity, and it shouldn't fight each other by any means,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but necessarily saying this is the PMS color and I want to paint my wall may or may not be a good thing.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Carolyn, what other tips or things that you run into in working with folks and kind of revamping their offices that are maybe some of the common problems you see that people have?
Besides the ones we just mentioned, clutter and
Yeah.
things
Uh-huh.
being dated and things of that sort, I think that I know one of the challenges with some of the people we worked with that are therapists is that they don't own their own space, or they don't have the ability to manage everything around their space. They're renting a
Mm-hmm.
room or two. So I would say to them, if that's happening to you, think about where people are walking through to get to your space before you
Mm-hmm.
rent that space. So you
Yes.
can have it's just like in real estate, that curb appeal as you come into
Mm-hmm.
the space. If you can't do a lot to change it, then, you have to work harder. You
Mm-hmm.
follow what I'm saying? So you have to, if there's always a compromise, it may be the best rent in town and it may be in a great location, have great parking, but the parking lot is full of holes and the front door is broken and some of those things that, is part of the impression that people are getting as they go
Oh
through the
yeah.
space.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
just what you can't control, you can still choose.
Yes.
You can still
Yes.
choose, and you may
Yeah.
need to choose no to that space if you can't
Right.
control it.
Right. A funny story about that. As you were talking about that, I think about one of the very first spaces that I used when I first got into private practice was at a doctor's office. And the room that they had available for me, you had to actually go through an exam room to get into the room where we were doing therapy. So that message right there was was difficult. And then if somebody were they had to use the exam room and I had a client, there was no noise filter whatsoever there. And it was just a nightmare. But needless to say, I didn't stay in that place long at all. But yeah, it was
But
just
yeah,
it just reminded me of just thinking, okay, when people come in, which way are you taking them to meet with you? And are you going, like are you having to go through down a back hallway or something, just that kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because you can make your space wonderful, but yeah,
Uh-huh.
what they have to walk through to get there
All right.
is not
Yeah.
really appealing. But if you can control your space, if you do have control of it, just really, I guess the biggest thing is just being aware and
Mm-hmm.
my big mission is to make people aware. Because once you have that awareness, then you begin to discern if this is good or bad.
Right.
as opposed to just going through with blinders on and not really. And it's not that's not your job.
Hmm.
That's not what you were trained to do.
Right.
It's just like I wasn't trained to be a therapist, but just as I become aware of things, being around
Hmm.
therapy or being with therapists, et cetera, I become much more aware of things that you see, and you see straight through them. You'll
Yes.
see straight. It's just different. And that's what a
Yeah.
designer does. I mean, that's their job. And you
Yes.
said that just, that class that we taught it at Life, or we still teach it at Life, they get like one semester of business. So it's not
Hmm.
like they get a lot,
Yeah.
because they come out of school complaining of the same thing. And I went to interior design school, and the majority of interior designers and interior architects end up working for themselves. So we don't learn anything about business either. So
Right.
you doing what you're doing, they these docs go to school, these therapists go to school to get licensed,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
They get everything they need to do so that they can get licensed, and then start to learn
Right.
what they need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Well, this has been a great topic, Carolyn, and I've got to be respectful of your time. But yeah, I think that a few points that I kind of take home points is what I'm trying to say is that your space really is a marketing tool for you.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it
It's a
sure
marketing
is.
tool, and you need to be intentional. You need to pay
Yes.
attention and be intentional.
Yes. Yes, that's
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, tell folks how they can get in touch with you to find out more about your work and what you do to help folks.
Yeah, I'd love to. So our company's name is Crossfield, CrossFields, and our website is crossfieldsdesign.com. And that handout I was telling you about, you can do it at crossfieldsdesign.com and the /listeners. And you can download that 5-point designer checklist. And our website was created originally as a blog of
Hmm.
information and educational articles before we ever started designing specifically for the practitioners. So
Awesome.
there's a lot of information on it. I'd love for
Yeah.
you to go there and
Yeah.
search around.
That's great. And we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary and for people to access that easily. So,
That
well,
sounds good.
Carolyn, it was so good to get to know you and enjoyed our conversation.
I enjoyed it too, Gordon.
Well, folks, thanks again to Carolyn for joining me on the podcast. And I hope you got some good ideas and just maybe some other things to think about in designing your office space and just how you see clients and the space you see them in. I think revisiting different topics like this are always a good idea because, with private practice, there is just not just one thing to think about. There are tons of other things to think about. And our space is very important. So be sure and check out Carolyn's things. You can find out more about what she does. And there's a mega offer that she's offering, and it's just at crossfieldsdesign.com/therapy. And so you can find out about that, or you can just go to practiceoftherapy.com/design and find out more about that offer. So take care, folks, and look forward to seeing you again or being with you. I won't see you, but being with you again next week. I'm getting ready to go to a music festival as I'm recording this, so I'll be going over to Merle Fest. If anybody is familiar with that, I'm sure you'll hear some more about that from me. But you can follow me on my personal Instagram, and I'm sure you'll see lots of pictures there. So, but anyway, take care, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your week and weekend. And also be sure and check out our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. You can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And also be sure and use the promo code just Gordon, Gordon, to try them out for 2 months for free. They are just, as I've said many times before, they're constantly impressing me with all the different ways in which they help therapists and improving their platform. It's what I use in my practice, and I just couldn't do without it. So Take care, folks, and have a great rest of your week or weekend. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.